Good morning, good afternoon, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Alec, and I'm here as usual to help answer any of your general or technical questions that may come up. But before we get started, I'd like to cover a couple things that you need to know about the session today. There's no dial-in number for attendees. All audio will be streamed to you through your computer speakers or headphones, so please adjust your volume there accordingly. You can submit questions for today's speakers or any technical issues you may encounter by clicking on that Q&A icon, which is located on the right-hand side of your screen. That icon is labeled here on this slide with the top arrow. Click that icon, type in your question, and click Submit. If it's a technical question, I should have an answer for you that would appear on your screen shortly after you submit, and if it's content-related, we may pull it during the Q&A session if time allows. You can follow along with a PDF by clicking on the handouts icon, also located on the right-hand side of your screen, labeled here with this bottom arrow on the slide. Click that icon on the right-hand side, and you should be able to pull down a PDF to take notes if you'd like to do that. Today's webinar is being recorded. You're going to receive a link to that recording and a follow-up email along with a link to the PDF as well. And then from us here at HCM and Workforce, you're going to receive your HRCI and SHRM certification codes for today's event. So please keep your eyes on that. Please be sure to check spam. That should come within about 24 hours. From HCM events. All right, so in today's webinar, how AI is changing the way you recruit and hire top talent, we have a couple great speakers, one from each of these companies here that you see, Cornerstone and IBM. First, we have Dan Mayville, the Executive HR Advisor with IBM, and Dan is an Executive HR Advisor, like I said, and his experience as an HR professional and longtime change management consultant serves as the foundation through which he advises HR executives on HR strategy and analytics. Joining Dan is Jennifer Burnett, the principal consultant for Cornerstone OnDemand. She has spent her career managing change, resolving business challenges, and executing talent strategy. So with those quick intros out of the way, we're going to get right into the content, and I'm going to first pass things over to you, Jennifer.
Thank you, Alec. And Dan and I are happy to join you all today to talk about a topic that is really near and dear to our hearts and is certainly changing rapidly, not only in HR, but really in the general business landscape. So that's probably a great place to start is, that rapid pace of technological change has been a top concern for CEOs and most likely the executives in your organization for the last couple of years because, of course, we're seeing it change not only the way in which business is conducted, but it's been a very disruptive force in many industries as well. And this has really come about because we're in a different stage that is being referred to as the fourth industrial revolution. So according to the World Economic Forum, because technology has been and will continue to be embedded into our society in ways that really involve and require entirely new capabilities for people and for machines, we are in a much different place than we were from our last industrial revolution. So this goes back to, if you sort of track this across time, initially we saw as a society a shift to more mechanization and changes in power. Then that shifted really in the 19th century and first decades of the 20th century to more electricity was a huge driver of that change, mass production. And then the third industrial revolution was in the 1950s with the development of more digital systems, rapid advancement in things like communication and computing power. And we've, of course, continued to evolve from there. So now we're really looking at those more cyber physical systems, and again, that are having a huge influence in industries and on people in general. It also is having a significant impact on the life of organizations. So organizations that are not agile and flexible and changing and rethinking sometimes their whole business, being innovative and able to change, we're seeing that they are not lasting quite as long. So the average lifespan of companies is now less than 20 years. one thing that we're seeing in that is that there's been a huge shift from more tangible assets to intangible assets. And what that really means is more emphasis on people and intellectual property. In fact, it's predicted that about 50% of the S&P 500 may actually be replaced over the next 10 years with new entrants to different industries. So a lot of that is being driven by technology. Now, what does that might mean for your industry? Well, really every industry and many, many roles are being impacted by these disruptions. So certainly think about areas such as manufacturing and the significant increase in robotics and automation in healthcare, the changes around genetic-based treatments, maybe in transportation. Of course, many of us think about the entrance of, Uber, Lyft, and other types of services, but also we are getting closer and closer to having driverless cars. In finance, we see disruptions such as Bitcoin. So it goes on and on. So if you're thinking this may not be affecting us yet, if I assure you that it probably is, and if not, be conscientious or conscious of how it may be affecting your business. And what does that do for to our workforce and for employees? Well, these disruptions, these changes are really changing the nature of work. So we are seeing people who are now in the workforce who are more digital natives versus digital immigrants. So their expectations around the use of technology has changed. We see more freelancers, contractors. We've talked about the gig economy, and we see people working longer. There's new types of jobs being created. Jobs that don't exist today are the ones that, if you have kids in elementary school, it's possible and likely that the job that they have one day may not even exist right now. So as we think through everything from the who, the what, the why is this happening, and how, then we have to rethink the way that we manage our workforce and acquire talent. So, and the reason why we need to think about it is because they're thinking about it. So our employees, as well as candidates, have really new expectations about work. They want to have that continuous learning opportunity. They want to feel empowered in their careers. They're seeking real-time performance feedback, which may be because, again, in our personal lives, we have apps and tools that encourage us to provide real-time feedback and very direct feedback about many different things. It could be about a restaurant you went to, or so when they come to work, there are things that they're experiencing in their personal life. They also expect when they go to work. They want that transparency. They want to feel like they're contributing to something larger and more meaningful. They also want to know that decisions made about their careers or opportunities that they have, decisions that are being made by managers, are data-driven, and that they also, again, are very transparent. So since we are living in a more connected world, we are challenged with these really expectations and perhaps even demands from our employees and certainly from candidates as well, which we want to talk about more from a talent acquisition perspective. So although it may feel like this, that at some stage the machines will take control, which is what Alan Turing said in the 1950s, and even some people may talk about, there certainly are some risks and challenges with this rapid increase in technology, but there's also great opportunity and great advantages. So allowing your company to be more competitive, and from an HR perspective, for us to think about how we really embrace this technology is really what we want you all to think about today as Dan and I really talk through this topic with you. So Dan, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk a little bit more about AI.
Absolutely, thanks. And let's also be honest, this is an incredibly exciting time for us in HR as we think about all of these changes and the impact that it's going to have on the workplace, the employees, and now what really kind of creates an opportunity for us to have an impact and help the organization to leverage the human capital assets to impact the business outcomes. I can tell you from our perspective within IBM, it's been a fascinating and incredibly exciting 2.5 to 3, maybe even 4 years now, where we've been focusing on how do we take advantage of our own capabilities. Everything that IBM has done in the HR space or in the artificial intelligence space, how do we leverage that within HR? And for the last 2.5 to 3 years, we've been developing these tools and assets and using them internally to help out ourselves as an organization to be more responsive to the increasing cycle of change and the rapid need or the need to rapidly respond to change when it comes to looking at the skills and the turnover and the changes. And as you know, the business pivots require us to kind of reevaluate our human capital assets within an organization. And we've really been seeing where AI has been focused on kind of 3 broad areas. One relates specifically to talent acquisition, and that's what we'll spend most of our time talking about today. But there's also a huge body of work that's focused on the talent development and how do we leverage all of the data that's available to us within the organization to enhance the experience for our people and all of our people, not just the employees, but those parts of the organization that are chartered and challenged to develop our people, to help them grow, to help them find new careers within the organization, and really to kind of increase an individual's length of stay within the organization. And then the third area, of course, is how do we leverage artificial intelligence and cognitive capabilities to increase efficiencies. And you know, I really like kind of the phrase of broadening the experience, because it's more than just creating a more engaging experience for our people. It's helping everybody in the process to be able to explore, to be able to understand what their opportunities are for growth and development and for a long-term employment within our organization. And then when we talk about, you know, what are these, how are we really seeing these cognitive capabilities accelerate the HR transformations? And most of the use cases that we've kind of started to develop today really revolve around personalizing recommendations. And that begins at the very beginning of an individual's experience with the organization from our perspective. How do we help you to understand what your skills and capabilities are and where they might be best used within our organization? To help a project manager who's looking for a project management role within an organization to understand that he or she has the ability to fill roles in product development and in services and things that might be outside of their initial thought process. But how do we kind of leverage the capabilities to really understand who they are and what their capabilities are and how we can best leverage them within our organization? So those kind of personalized recommendations. Or when we think about internal mobility and developing your career path within an organization, how do we look at what your career aspirations are? How many times has an individual had an interest or a desire to kind of re-career? And when we talk about making personalized recommendations, we're talking about how do we understand what they bring to the table and what the gap is for the areas that they want to kind of move into, and make recommendations on ways that they can close that skills gap and make themselves more competitive going forward. I think the greatest example of that today is the huge demand for cybersecurity resources. I mean, that's kind of, cybersecurity has exploded as an area where we are really far behind in having the skills and the experience. And there's not really kind of formal education programs in the university levels to develop those skills, or as they're emerging. but how do we kind of look at our workforce and identify people who have the right disposition and the right attitudes and enough of the right traits to make them a candidate for things like cybersecurity jobs. And even as we're still kind of defining what the skills and the traits and the requirements are. And so that's just an example of the personalized recommendations. But then we're also seeing, just the digital change and the ability to really ingest and manage data that's accelerating an organization's ability to respond and make changes going forward. So that brings me to a moment to pause and to give you an opportunity to ask questions. But here's a polling question that we're just curious if you'll take a minute to answer. To what degree have AI and intelligent technologies been adopted and currently used within your organization? If you guys would take a minute and answer the question, then we can look at the responses. Alec, you'll have to guide me here if I hit next or if you're going to display them. I forget how you manage the quick polls.
Yeah, we'll leave it up. We've got about 30% of people in here have answered so far, so we'll leave it up for a couple more seconds, and then I'll go ahead and share the results.
Thank you, sir.
No problem. All right, here we go. I'm going to share those now. Okay. Dan, are you able to see the results here?
I see that we have 0% for all of the results. I don't see any data in there yet.
Okay. Well, what we have here is 0% for the first option. AI is widely used in various areas and functions. We have 13% for the next, and AI has already been adopted in critical areas. 25% in AI is being implemented but not yet in use for some areas. 46% with the fourth option of AI is being considered but not yet in use. And then 16% with AI is not even being considered yet.
Yeah, so thank you for reading through all of those, Alec, and it seems entirely consistent with, I should have been a little bit more adventurous and ventured some predictions on where I thought that would be, but I think it's, with the entry of artificial intelligence into the HR space really being very new, I think it doesn't surprise me to see the numbers in that low, and primarily the largest swatch being where people are considering those options. So I think it's exciting that everybody's really knocking on the door for these capabilities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Dan, if I could jump in, I think that we probably could have predicted. It's certainly something that we both hear from many organizations is, or perhaps, more advanced technologies are used in parts of the organization and tends to come to HR much later. And so that's why, again, it's great that we're having these kinds of conversations like we're having today about where the opportunity lies for AI. Or any, the AI we're using, of course, really covers sort of a broad range of different types of technologies. So, so what I wanted to share, and if I could sort of take it from here, and then I will sort of hand it back to you. Oh. So, much like we were just sharing, and of course we want to, get a little bit more focused on this from a talent acquisition perspective. And one thing, even though many of you said we're considering it, or gosh, we're not considering it at all, hopefully you one of the takeaways you'll have today is to demystify this a little bit for you. So again, even what I just referred to as really how are we defining AI? So we should have sort of done that at the top of the hour. But there are many different types of tools and solutions that leverage, of course, automation, machine learning, many other what we may call intelligent technologies, cognitive technologies, and as you mentioned, predictive tools. So it is sort of a broad range, and you may find that you are using, something today that you may not have considered really to be sort of fall under that umbrella of AI. But it also is not sort of you'll find that there's opportunities to implement these kinds of changes or these kinds of tools into your processes, maybe a little at a time. It's not necessarily, something that has to be overwhelming or confusing. So, and again, I always love to talk about or think about what we're already all just in our personal lives experiencing, and then how that may or may not, but should transfer into your workplace as well. So certainly from a talent acquisition perspective, as Steve Goodman said, one of the things that we're seeing and that candidates are experiencing and organizations are starting to take advantage of is that we're able to use more matching technology, smart technology to for jobs to find the candidates, not just the candidates to find the jobs. And in the marketplace that we're in right now, the labor market we're in, that is a very, very valuable tool. So I'm going to spend the next few minutes talking about how to captivate that modern, savvy candidate. Again, whether they're digital natives or digital immigrants, people really have embraced their own technologies, and they're looking for that experience when they're seeking career opportunities, job opportunities as well. And again, given the environment that we're in right now with the low employment and there are people who are seeking jobs, but they may not be doing it very actively. And how do you reach those individuals? So that is a huge driver for embracing sometimes this type of technology, because the sourcing techniques that we've used in the past just may not be as effective anymore. And areas like sourcing and marketing in the talent acquisition process are areas that are very conducive to using more advanced technologies. And what you'll find as we talk through this is, of course, not everything should or be automated. What we're trying to find is those areas that where we can take some of the more routine type of work off of the plate of the recruiters, improve the candidate experience, and then allow them, the recruiters and the candidates, to keep those high touch steps in the process. So again, reaching passive and semi-active candidates is one of those areas. So we're seeing an increase in job ad technology, so that, again, your job posting can be delivered to the right audience really at the right time, whether it's through ads or social media. And so it's, very, very useful type of technology that's sort of out there looking for your candidates for you, so to speak. Obviously, there are steps that you take to enable that, to identify what are the types of candidates you're looking for, and obviously what the type of jobs that you're trying to attract them towards. I also want to mention that, regardless of the tools that we talk about today, your career site is still very, very critical. Of course, people, even if they see information, a job ad, they're still going to come to your career site to find out more about the organization, more about the role. So, and that's, of course, where you're communicating a lot of information about your brand, about the positions, about the culture, and so forth. But don't underestimate the power of the analytics for your career site. So again, as with the advancements of analytics tools, that really kind of high-powered reports and dashboards, you can get some important insights that then you can use to help to drive, again, those targeted ads, even your recruiting strategy, sourcing strategy, and so forth. So make sure that you are taking advantage of the analytics just on your career site in particular. But then note that when people visit your career site, capturing information about them, having them voluntarily, of course, provide information, then can be used to identify, especially if those you're starting to identify people who are either get to the final stage of the hiring process or, of course, are also hired. Then that gives information about, we want more like this, or for these types of roles, these are some common features of candidates that seem to be successful for us, for a good fit for them and a good fit for us to be seeking, more people from different areas or different backgrounds and so forth, different experiences. Now, from a candidate's perspective, of course, all this technology is great. They want that efficiency, they want transparency, but they also still want a personalized process. So you may be thinking, well, if I automate too much, that doesn't seem like a very personalized process. But what we mean when we're talking about personalization, and Dan, you referred to this earlier, is that, again, think about when you go on Amazon and you're greeted by name, you're perhaps asked what you thought about your last purchase, you're even recommended some new items that match your buying patterns. That's really what we're referring to as personalization, so that it feels like to that candidate that the information is really geared towards them and what they've already shared with you and what they're looking for. So there are ways, again, through more intelligent technologies in order to you still have consistency in your messaging and your brand, but you can create more specific personas and EVPs depending upon who's visiting you and finding out more information before they ever even talk to a recruiter. Speaking of before you talk to a recruiter, chatbots are also another way, again, also that we typically interact with in sort of our regular non-working lives, so not foreign to people seeking jobs as well. They may want answers maybe in the middle of the night, or it may be something that they need, in very short amount of time, because certainly the candidates today are not available for very, very long. So in lieu of waiting for a recruiter to respond, it's very much more simple for them to get answers to their questions or to seek information, and again in a more personalized way through a chatbot. So again, a good way of using automation and intelligent technologies. And so that helps them to make more informed decisions. Don't underestimate the fact that they aren't going to they're not going to spend a lot of time. In fact, Career Builder had published some research saying that 1 in 5 candidates say they're not willing to complete an application that takes them 20 minutes or more, and 76% of them want to know how long it will take before they ever start. So transparency, simplicity, expediency, and personalization are all key features that your candidates are looking for that candidate experience. So also, of course, we want to think about this from the organizational perspective. Those same tools, matching techniques, automated processes, chatbots, are also advantageous to your recruiters and your talent acquisition team, because it allows them to gather information about candidates, about applicants, that they may not have time to gather themselves. It also, by having tools that even can recommend other positions to candidates or help them determine whether they're a good fit, that certainly saves the recruiters a lot of time, because people can self-select out earlier in the process, or again, apply for another job that they might not have even considered. And so recruiters are benefiting significantly from these tools as well, and getting ideally higher quality candidates for the roles that they are trying to fill. So speaking of the recruiters, ultimately these types of changes, if you put them into place, are not only directly impacting the candidate satisfaction, it certainly can impact the manager's decision-making accuracy, but as we keep mentioning, it's affecting recruiter efficiency too. So in a typical talent acquisition team, what we have found is that recruiters spend about 40% of their time reviewing resumes and reviewing candidates, about 20 to 25% of their time searching for those candidates or sourcing candidates, and about 15% of their time on scheduling And then the rest of the time are things like making offers or, more administrative tasks. So that's 75% of their time on reviewing resumes, sourcing, and scheduling. Now, remember, those are the same areas that I mentioned before. I probably didn't mention scheduling, but those are all areas that are very conducive to you being able to leverage technology in order to really gain more efficiencies from that process. So this is, something that we're very focused on at Cornerstone. We know that recruiters have a high volume of candidates that are coming in, and we have more and more data about them than ever before. So it can be challenging and be overwhelming, and recruiters need to be able to get to that information very quickly, connect with those candidates. That's where, their true value is, and building the relationships with those candidates. And of course, their relationships with the hiring managers to find the right people. And so the more efficient and effective the recruiter can be, the better the experience is going to be for the candidates and for the hiring managers. So again, we leverage, automation and machine learning technology in order to help recruiters do that. At the same time, let's not forget that your employees are candidates too. Unfortunately, many people believe that it's easier to find a job outside their organization than inside it. So we'll touch on that in a second. But when you do hire from inside your company, the time to fill is much shorter, and employees, of course, seem to be able to hit the ground running faster, so tend to be able to perform better in that role. So your employees are candidates too. So think about, like, this first statistic, 47% say it's easier to find a job outside your organization than inside it. Think about why that may be. So, for example, probably everyone here is on LinkedIn, and you probably get an email every week saying, here are some recommended jobs for you. I am pretty confident that none of us are getting emails from your own employer saying, here's a job for you, here's a recommended job for you. That's just one example. Or even if you look at your internal career site versus your external career site, or how your employees find information about open positions, we often, don't provide the same level or same degree of information to internal candidates. But again, in this market, in this labor market, and knowing that there is a growing skills gap in our economy, being able to build those skills internally is so critical. So that's a very important pool of talent for you. One thing that we have been able to do at Cornerstone is really look at the career opportunities for employees more holistically. So, and again, leveraging more advanced technology. So using information that's already in your organization about how people have moved through the organization from role to role, what skills and competencies are required for those roles, how people have developed, and what type of training or experiences they had before they were either made a lateral move or promotion. All of that's data in your talent management system. So turning that around and sharing that with your employees to say, here's an opportunity, here's your profile, here's your interest, here's an opportunity that you may consider inside the organization, and here's how to get there, and here's what steps to take. So again, using, in this case, machine learning technology that recognizes those patterns and can make recommendations to your employees about what their next step may be, and have a much richer conversation with their manager, and also, of course, with recruiters as well. So lots of different ways to that we've leveraged and that you can leverage more intelligent technologies that, again, should seem a little bit more in sync with the processes that you may already have, and just what it's doing is really elevating it and taking it to the next level. So one thing that I'm going to switch over to you, Dan, because another area, we're going to ask you guys another question in a second, but another area we've mentioned for sourcing, scheduling, and screening, even areas that are conducive to using AI type of technology, and another is certainly selection and assessments. And so, Dan, I'm going to turn it over to you. I know we want to ask the participants a question before we jump into that topic.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can see now the question on the screen if you guys will take a minute. And I think it really, what for me is it's fascinating and makes all of this exciting is even as Jennifer's talking about how do we think about the internal mobility and tapping into the internal candidates, it still kind of comes back to the original skills or the ways that we've been assessing talent for a long time now. And so how do we think about providing our people internally with a way to self-measure and self-assess their level of fit for an internal role? And it still kind of goes back to all this whole notion of providing an individual experience for candidates, for recruiters, for everybody involved in the process. All of that's predicated on the data. And so not just the resume or the CV data, but what we know locally within our organization as what the requirements are. And so it's even as AI kind of works its way in and we've gotten now this influx of technology that helps us provide a more engaging experience, it's still all predicated on data. It still comes back to the more information we have about an individual, the more we can assess about an individual, the more able we're going to be to find the right role for them and to find the right candidate for the roles we're trying to fill. So it's interesting how it all kind of gets down to this core area of, how do we use assessments and this kind of data? So looking at these results, and I can see them now, Alec, that, yeah, there's the amount of organizations that use just pure straight skills tests is interesting. It's a little bit lower than maybe what I would have thought it would have been. And we can talk about that because I think in the world where AI is able to ingest more data, we can help you to see where skills testing is going to be helpful. And it's a good number to see that the organization's almost at 50% using various assessments as a part of the hiring process. And I think that that's good for a couple of reasons, because it creates an opportunity for you to leverage assessments to qualify candidates and to narrow down your pipeline to get the right people in. But it also creates feedback mechanisms back to the candidates to let them see and to get updates and understand why they are or why they are not progressing in the process. So I think that actually leveraging skills tests and assessments is a great opportunity for organizations to increase that interaction with their people or their candidates, and to help them understand how they're progressing and take their own kind of assessments. Let's see if I can advance here. All right. But I do think, when we, again, go back to the IBM Connexa kind of legacy mindset around assessments, it was more than just getting data to figure out if candidate A was a better fit than candidate B. It really it's still incredibly important that the focus be not just on the assessment themselves, but what's the impact? What are we really trying to change and get a better perspective on by engaging with candidates to complete assessments? Are we looking at getting an understanding of what their career development needs are? Are we going to use this information to help them not only find their way into a role, but then also define for them earlier in their experience with an organization what the learning paths might look like? I think it's important when we think about whatever kind of assessments that you're looking at using, it's what's the impact? What are you really hoping to leverage beyond just a binary score of a pass or a fail? It's important to have this measure so that you know, how are we making the organization better through our abilities to better assess our talent. Why doesn't it want to play here? Here we go. And so there's a number of different kind of applications or mindsets for how we should be or could be thinking about how do we use assessments. And I don't need to read through all of these, but just to kind of, as you're thinking about your current use of assessments, how do they align to these different kinds of areas? And are we really using them for that? Or are we just using them because there's a cut score that a candidate has to achieve in order to be advanced in the process? And I would encourage you to, as you really kind of think through that, to have more than just the goal of the hiring process to be associated with the use of assessments. Because as you can see here, and you'll have this as a part of the deck that you can download, the ability to measure performance of the talent acquisition process is really what the goal should be. And no longer are we able to get away with the idea that we know we're hiring better. I think there's now, with this influx of data, with the ability to analyze our performance, there's now the onus is on us as an HR part of the organization to demonstrate to the rest of the organization how we're impacting the business goals and the outcomes. How are we becoming better customer service organizations? How is it improving our time to market on product development? How are we hiring better salespeople, as demonstrated through the additional revenue that sales people are able to generate because of the assessment process? And then it's equally important, as you think about your assessment strategy, to understand what the limitations are with the assessments, and to not just kind of get down this path where it's the data drives all of the decisions. Everything should be, how do we leverage data to augment the intelligence we have for the decisions we're going to make? And that should be our goal. I think I can advance through it. Just a couple of examples of when we think about skills tests, how do we use some very simple task-focused tests as a way to kind of weed out is probably the wrong words to use, but how do we use them to kind of make an initial assessment of our candidate pool and understand who has the right skills for the unique requirements of our organization? And that's still, for us, we still find organizations have tremendous value in that activity. And then you can kind of take that one step further and really think about what are the behavioral assessments that we would maybe look to deploy in a round 2 or a round 3 assessments of candidates. And so just to kind of get the thoughts flowing around, what kind of tests we're really thinking about when we're talking about behavioral assessments and job fit, and even some of the newest ones where we're actively within IBM trying to help organizations overcome this cybersecurity aptitude deficiency that we're seeing. So just examples of how assessments can and should be used within an organization to help you to advance your candidates and to create more data that allows you to create a more unique individual experience and to really differentiate what makes one candidate better than another. Jennifer, I'm going to skip through some of these because I desperately want to leave time for the Q&A, and I think this is really just some summary and overview kind of thoughts. The last thing I would say is that one of the things that I think we're seeing in North America that we've not traditionally seen, but it's where organizations are tapping into assessments and have an interest and an appetite for providing individuals with their feedback scores as a way to kind of jumpstart and accelerate a personalized learning campaign. And I think that that's a pretty fascinating new trend that we're seeing. But I'm going to kind of pause there, Jennifer. I'll advance to like a summary because I think if you'll cover the summary and takeaways, then maybe we can give our audience a chance to ask some questions.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you, Dan. So Dan and I have shared a lot of information with you today. So I'm going to just step through maybe some what we feel like are important takeaways for you to think about today. And of course, we're both available should you have any follow-up questions. But we have time today to take some questions during the webinar as well. But probably most importantly, as I mentioned earlier, we want to demystify AI a little bit, help you see that there are opportunities to really embrace AI technology. You may already have certain aspects of these type of intelligent technologies in your the tools that you're using today, but it certainly is going to become much more prevalent because the benefits are so clear and significant. So again, intelligent technologies have already impacted how companies conduct business, the way we work, and employees' expectations about work. So that's where we are today, and that will only continue to increase. So even the demand from your own employees or from your own candidates in and of itself may drive this type of change in your organization. With regard to candidates, their experience is extremely important because they are really much more aware and want more information probably than ever before. So they want that, again, simple, transparent, and mobile. We didn't talk about that much, but very mobile and engaging experience, because they absolutely, and again, I keep referring to this market of where it's, a lot of the power is in their hands, but regardless of the employment landscape, it's certainly a two-way decision, and they want to make sure the opportunity is right for them. Recruiters certainly can leverage AI and automation. It really helps to provide greater efficiency in their own work and allows them to then focus on those value-added activities where they're having those, more meaningful relationships with the candidates, and again, most importantly, also with the hiring managers, so they continue to seek and find the right people to help to advance the business goals. So tools like the selection assessments, or as Dan mentioned, really assessments of many different types, are very, very powerful predictive tools that allow you to make, very accurate decisions. And also, and we didn't spend as much time on this, but the process continues. So hopefully you're thinking end to end. It's not just about, acquiring and hiring talent, but onboarding them. And then it comes full circle as your employees also seek out additional opportunities within the organization. And of course, the ultimate goal, and Dan, you mentioned this as well, is that all of these types of solutions are enabling you to help the business, helping you as an HR partner help the business achieve their strategic goals. It starts with talent, so things like engagement, retention, productivity, but it also should be directly linked to and measured of the impact that it's having on things like customer satisfaction, revenue, and the business goals of your organization. So again, hopefully this has been very helpful and informative. Alec, we can take some questions. I know some people may have already sent some in, and we can, ask for additional ones as well.
All right, yeah, Jennifer, thank you and Dan for that. We have quite a few questions in already, so we're going to jump in and take as many of these as we can with the time that we have remaining. So if you do have a question, though, please don't hesitate to submit those. You can click on that Q&A icon on the right-hand side of your screen, type that question in, and click submit. But we're going to go to one first, and this one's going to come from Russell. Russell's question is, when you say a company lifespan is now 20 years, are you referring to the length of their existence or viability?
Yeah, that's a good distinction. It really is about their, we have seen companies, so Sears is a great recent one that many people probably could argue, has had struggles in the last, even 5 or 10 years. So, I think I would say it is more about the viability. I think there's also organizations that we've seen, they kind of continue on in their, probably outdated business models or have not advanced rapidly enough, but are not nimble enough to change. And others enter those industries and start, taking market share from them. And it's, I think we've seen it time and time again as a little bit overwhelming. One of, sort of classic case that I often talk about, because a lot of us can reminisce about sort of our days when you used to, Friday night, you used to go pick out your VHS tape at Blockbuster, so you can watch movies over the weekend. And if you think about how rapidly that market changed with the introduction of Netflix and, what Blockbuster tried to do in terms of sort of meeting Netflix where they were in that, DVD and mailing things to you, it's just a good example of again, sort of the not only willingness, but sort of capability of the organization to sort of shift to those new demands. And a lot of those new entrants, so I can't give you an exact number, but a lot of those new entrants are to those industries are coming in with just more, leveraging more advanced technologies in order to think. They're thinking differently, but they're doing differently. And that's what's challenging those existing organizations. So I would say probably they're not declining they're not closing their doors in 20 years, but they become less viable.
Okay, perfect. In this next question is going to come from Michael. Michael's question, and I think I'll tee this one up to you, Dan. This one came in while you were speaking. So Michael's question is, how are assessments done for skills that aren't easy to test for? So, example, leadership. Does a person self-assess, or is it something else?
Yeah, that's a great question, and so there's a number of different ways that you can go at it. But what you would typically do in that situation is start to ask situational type questions, and then what that allows you to do is to understand how somebody can interpret a situation and what their response would be to it, and use those kind of testing measures as a way to just make sure that they think and respond and react in a way that is consistent with what the requirements of the role are, right?
Okay, perfect. And we're going to stick with you on this next one here, Dan, and this one comes from Russell. Another one from Russell here. Have we reached a stage in AI and machine learning where candidates can be told that they are not a good fit without facing lawsuits?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think where we're at with that is, again, that, and I'm trying to think through the ideas, is that all through interacting with an AI or a chatbot, get that. I think we can definitely leverage artificial intelligence to help us make those assessments, and we can leverage artificial intelligence in a way to make sure that we're not managing situations with bias per se, but that decision and that assessment is not something that would be left to artificial intelligence, right? It's still an individual assessment. Jennifer, I know you've got a lot of experience in this space too, so I don't want to dominate the answer.
No, that's a great point. So I'll just add in. I have just in my many years in the talent acquisition space and in specialized in selection assessments in particular. Assessments actually, are very accurate, have been around for a long time, and when used probably in a more very specific screening setting, the organizations that I've been part of, we have used them to directly screen people out and say, no, you are not a fit for this role. And it does certainly save the recruiters a lot of time. Very, very early in the funnel, basically. I think what's changed, though, honestly, is as in, there are things that we can do today with, let's say, even video interviewing, facial recognition type of technology that I think we're at the point where it's like we can do things, and then we're asking ourselves, should we do these things, and where does it fit in the process? So I think there's certainly a place for these tools that serve a different level of complexity and sophistication. The more sophisticated they get, remember, none of these tools, no matter, I don't believe the machines will take over the world. All of these tools require human intervention, even to, of course, confirm and set up the algorithms. And then, of course, once you've, confirmed that they're working, they can kind of run on their own. But to Dan's point, there is a very high level of awareness around bias, especially for high stakes decisions like hiring decisions, that, again, the advantage, there's maybe some risk there, but the advantage is we're able to look at such more data than we ever have before, so we can feel more confident in putting those solutions in place, and that we can constantly monitor them to make sure they're doing the right thing. So it's definitely a balancing act, but these tools are not, really kind of running completely on their own, but they and there should be governance and sort of rules around when and how they're used. So I think we're not quite, I think in many cases we can do exactly what you asked. Yes, you can screen out people with certain types of assessments, but there are other types of tools that we're not there yet, because it's just, we're not quite sure. Like I said, we can, but should we? So that's just something to kind of think about and watch, I'd say, over the next couple of years.
All right, perfect. It looks like we have time for maybe one more, it's looking like. So unfortunately, we're not going to be able to get to all the questions today, but I'm going to stick with you on this, Jennifer, just to start us off on this, because it kind of ties in to that previous question. AI and machine learning seems to be useful in scanning the data and grabbing qualified candidates to contact. Do you ever see it growing into more of an in-depth process, such as a full interview?
Oh, it does kind of go with the earlier question. So honestly, I do. So if I had my crystal ball today, I would say, those early steps in the process, again, trying to balance carefully, at some point the candidate wants to interact with the recruiter, so you can't wait too long on that. But especially in high volume positions, or high volume, where you have a high volume very maybe geographically dispersed, candidate pools. So it's just very, very difficult to manage for a recruiter. You want to put those kinds of tools into place, and you could, have them step through a process where they meet, sort of some basic qualifications, basic criteria, and then you invite them, for, like I said, a video interview. I know even, it's becoming much more commonplace. I know when my son, who's in college, was looking for a job, all of his first interviews were video interviews. And, I just reminded him, make sure, you at least wear, a coat and tie, no matter if you still have your shorts or jeans on. So when you're on the camera, that you look very professional. So there it is. And he didn't think twice about it. Like, it was very natural to him. And he knew, though, that, of course, if he, as do most candidates, I'm still kind of going through the process. And the next step will be, if I'm a good fit, then I'll talk to a recruiter. But again, remember some of the stats I gave you guys too, of that, there's also sort of this application exhaustion from some applicants. They may, they won't stick with it very long. So you need to be communicating with them the whole time. What comes next? What can they expect? And I do think technology can help get them pretty far through the process, and great certainly great efficiencies for the recruiter.
All right, that's going to be all the time we do have today. So Jennifer and Dan, thank you both for taking the time to be here with us today. And I want to thank Cornerstone OnDemand for sponsoring this event today. This is part one of a three-part series we have with Cornerstone. And the next event in this series will be taking place on November 28th. So you can find information on that event at workforce.com. And that would be in the events tab there. So thanks again to Jennifer, Dan, everybody on the line for joining us today. If you enjoyed the presentation, please take a moment to fill out our post-event survey, which is going to appear right as this webinar ends. So if you enjoyed it, we'd appreciate the feedback. It does help us improve future events. So thanks again to everybody, and have a great day.